can click to start streaming. And we are live at exactly noon our time, well 3 p.m. Metals time. All right, so this is, I've totally lost count of which episode this is, but welcome everybody to the Headphone Show live stream. And for today, we have special guest Sankar from Audeze and Metal571. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go over a number of topics, and then at the end we'll try and get a little bit of Q&A going as well with some folks in the chat. But just to give everybody a sense of what we're going to talk about, we're going to just talk about some of the impacts of the whole isolation for the headphone industry that's going on right now. Talk about a couple of headphone models, LCD1, LCD-GX, a couple of technical areas like what is SLAM in detail. Talk about measurements and all of that kind of stuff, and then get into some conversations about some high-end headphones as well and directions for Audeze's high-end headphones. So this is going to be the Audeze episode, I suppose. And without further ado, I'll introduce you guys to Sankar. Thanks so much for joining us, Sankar. And I might as well start right away. Ask you a question of how has the pandemic impacted you guys, and from an operations perspective, are you guys able to cope with everything, or how do you see this playing out?
Well, I mean, it's a little weird at the moment.
Yeah.
We are in lockdown in California, so unfortunately, we had to temporarily suspend production. So, but we are trying to do some, small mitigation things. But there's some little bit of shipping and receiving of urgent things. But majority of things, some of the non-production people are working from home. R&D and all the sales, marketing, all those guys are still working. Whatever inventory we have, we are still selling, but production has ground to a halt. We hope the restrictions will be lifted soon and we will be able to continue. But at the moment, it's little. I mean, it's all over the world. It's not just here.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to see how things resolve.
Yeah, my understanding is that while the supply chain interruptions may not hit everybody at the same time, they probably will hit everybody at some point. So there's always going to be a gap.
It's kind of a double whammy, right? It initially hit China and then here now. So
yeah,
the supplies that we couldn't, like Mobius stuff we had, things were pending in January. Now we are able to ship some of them, but the problem is all the flights are overbooked now because there's very few flights carrying these tools. So it's very messy.
One of the things that I've seen sort of happen with a lot of other businesses is for the operations side of things is they've figured out ways of making that work from home, making that work from isolated environments, and that means in some cases figuring out ways to have better internet connections and all this stuff. I mean, have you guys had to adjust anything so that the rest of the the work still happens?
I mean, some of this, for the marketing and sales and even R&D, it's very easy.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I was hoping.
Those are things that continue. And the other important thing for us is many of our employees, almost 90% of our employees, have health insurance through Audeze. So we didn't want to lay off anybody and things like that and weather this through. So some of their employees, there are some things that we could do from home, even assembly work a little bit, right? For example, packaging material, all those things. So we are prepping some of those things so that when things open up, we can start production on a scale.
Cool. I guess, I mean, we were talking earlier about the impacts of this on trade shows and in the headphone industry as well. We're not going to be able to do all the shows that we would want to ideally, and CanJam was sort of the last one there before all this stuff happened. And yeah, I mean, it stands to reason. I mean, as you were saying before, I mean, you wouldn't want to risk an employee by sending them to a trade show or anything like that.
At this moment, yeah, it's very risky, and I think this situation is going to change it's the effects will be there for a while. I don't think it's going to be
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we might as well launch into some of the more positive topics. So at CanJam the most recent CanJam, we got a chance to see the LCD1 closed prototype. I was wondering if you could give us an update on that, or for me, like when I saw that it was going to be wireless, part of me was like, oh, but I'm the audiophile and I want to be able to plug things into amps and DACs and whatever else. But then at the same time, like thinking about it afterwards, I kept thinking to myself, this is something that I actively want. Like the wireless component as well. So yeah, are there any updates on that?
It's we don't know when exactly we are going to release it because of the impact of the virus. But there is a headphone here. Yeah, we designed it as an active headphone. It's possible to make it also passive. The question is the in the if you look at even Mobius, the amount of people who use the analog connection on it is very very low. It's obviously doesn't have all the feature set, but so we are still contemplating, should we make a passive version or should we just have a completely active headphone. The some of the worries that we used to have with Bluetooth are going away. Battery life, for example, even the quality of audio with aptX HD and LDAC, it's becoming better. One of the things with the planar drivers, especially the Mobius, the LCD1 drivers, are super efficient. So we are able to get something between 60 to 72 hours of battery life on the Felix, as we call it internally. You might not need to charge it that often, and the charge lasts for a long time. The other advantage of having it all completely active is we don't have to bypass a circuit, and we don't have to overdamp the headphone also
I was
completely.
going to ask about that, the damping. I mean, one of the attractive things about the LCD1, the open back, is of course the form factor. But when you're taking a planar headphone and closing it off in that kind of small form factor, I mean, are there any additional challenges that are required in order to close it off to get the frequency response to be where you want it to be, or what's sort of what's the challenge there, and then how are you guys overcoming it?
So in it's in general for all closed back planars, and in fact for even other types of headphones,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what happens is when you close it, you get obviously the reflection going through the diaphragm again, and so there are three ways that can be used to mitigate this, right? There is going to be compromises somewhere to get the frequency response you want. One way is to damp it significantly, but what happens is when you do this quite a bit, it also kills the resolution or the
Mm-hmm.
detail. It doesn't have the same liveliness that you will get from a planar driver.
Right.
So we try to achieve a balance between these when we design the headphones. We don't want to completely um, overdamp it so that it doesn't feel like uh, it doesn't feel very lively. The second way of doing it is if you have very sharp peaks and stuff, you can put some LC filters and kill them off. We did this with the Sine headphones and stuff. The third way is also, I mean, and again, these are not mutually exclusive things. You can have all three of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a little bit of damping or whatever you think is the right balance for damping. You can also add LC filters or other filters to kill off some notches. You can have, obviously, we design physically the ear cup and stuff to accommodate these things also. I mean, even ear cup design matters quite a bit in this. And then the third one is something like if you have an active headphone like the Mobius, you could use signal processing. So it really depends upon the headphone and the market we are going after. If it is a pure audiophile headphone, I think the best option is to do the first two, not add too much DSP in it.
Mm-hmm.
And but if we are also going to a pro market or a gamer market, you can add the um, signal processing component also into it. And we have never been shy about this. We sell the Resolve plugins. We put the DSP in the lightning cables, and even before that, we actually had a box that we call the black box, where you could actually arbitrarily draw any frequency response, and it would actually compute the convolution filters to get you the frequency response you need.
Awesome. Metal, do you have any questions for Sankar on the LCD1 closed?
Well, actually, I was going to say, so I know that Abyss is doing something with self-damping drivers. I was wondering if you had any comments on that, because I don't know of any other planar manufacturers are doing something like that.
I don't know enough about that particular driver, so I mean,
Well, it just doesn't need a
the
seal,
final,
apparently, to produce all the bass response or something like that. And I just thought that was interesting. I'd never seen that before.
yeah, so there is, there are multiple ways of doing this. I think it is, I think Final Audio from Japan also had something similar. I'm not fully sure what it is. I think they called it the air damping system, or something.
Air film damping.
Air film
Oh,
damping.
that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there, but in our headphones, we want to have very controlled bass without resonant peaks and stuff like that in the low frequency, because sometimes this can give you a artificial sense of slam. So what we wanted to have is very controlled diaphragm behavior. So that's one of the reasons we go with the approach that we have for our closedback headphones.
Would you anticipate, more closed back headphones? I mean, I guess depending on the way things go, but for some of the higher end stuff as well. I mean, you've done the LCD XC and the LCD2 closed. Or do you envision, some of the maybe like the LCD GX but closed or something like that? Maybe around 900 plus.
Yeah, I mean, we have we are always working on several different things at some point. At any point, I think
For
we
sure.
have 6 or 7 different projects at the same time. It's sometimes things fall in place very quickly, like the Mobius. Sometimes it just takes longer. We don't want to release a headphone before it's ready, but we do think that there is a market for closebacks, a really nicely done closeback below, in around the LCD2 close 2C price range.
Yeah, I mean, I just, the audience probably knows that I released a video on planar versus dynamic, sort of a basic overview. I was doing my research on this and realized that there's hardly any high-end closeback planar magnetic headphones, and I just imagine that, apart from some of the ones that you guys are doing, I just imagine that it's an additional design challenge there to get the frequency response right for when you close off the back of the headphone, to balance the damping and the frequency response and everything.
Yep.
But that's very interesting.
Yeah, but if you look at it, all the lower end headphones are closeback. Entry level headphones, the Mobius being a prime example.
Yeah.
And it's actually Mobius is probably one of the most linear closebacks.
So is that partially because it's of the DSP, or is it just easier?
We use all three things. We use, we get the damping. We use a DSP, and also the I think the LC filters are there too. High frequencies.
Right. So for the LCD1 closed, is that's then the same driver as the LCD1 open? Is that correct?
It's not. No, it's slightly different. I mean, the driver size is the same, but the driver itself is slightly different because now we have electronics involved. So what we do is, for example, the Mobius driver, it's not outside. You can't access it directly. You have to go through electronics. But the amplifier that we used in Mobius is optimized for 6 to 8 ohms impedance. So we designed the Mobius driver to accommodate it. So with LCD, the Felix or the Mobius, the important thing is to optimize the driver so that we can get the most efficiency possible with the chipsets and amplifier chipsets and the Bluetooth chipsets. So we designed the driver to exactly fit those parameters.
And speaking of the amplifier, what is the amplifier in there, or
Um,
if you're able to talk about
uh,
it?
I need to,
Yeah,
we will put the specs and stuff because there is, again, as I said, some of the fine details on LCD1 closeback are not finalized yet.
for sure. Still in prototype.
Some things that we might be able to change, but we will publish this information. There's no big secret there.
For sure. Okay, I guess
So
moving on from. Go ahead.
am I loud enough? I just realized I might not be.
This is better, I think.
Okay.
This is, but yeah, I wanted to move on from the LC1 closed, and unless Metal, do you want to? Was there anything else you wanted to ask about that?
No, I was just gonna say that I agree. There's almost no high end, especially high end planar options. I mean, what do we
Like
have?
super high end, right?
Yeah, like I think the only players in the closed high end space at all is really like the Stellia and what is it? The Verite closed. But there's also, I guess, the Ether closed, Ether Flow closed. Yeah, it's the only one I can think of other than the XC. I think at the moment. So
Well, there's
it would be
Aeon
interesting.
2 closed,
Aeon,
but
right,
then
but that's not like 3,000
yeah,
or whatever,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So I think that's a market that, I mean, that's certainly what I'm interested in. I don't know if, because I'm just thinking of like all the people who are, especially now, the work from home crowd, where, we're in environments where, maybe there's a family or you hear background sounds from home because it's not in an ideal, environment. Or even in my case, it's my computer fans are always spinning up when I'm rendering something, and it introduces noise floor like crazy. So I'm always on the lookout for like the best possible closeback, and then you realize that like that sort of stops at around like $3,000. It doesn't go any higher than that, and it doesn't go. There's very limited selection there as well. So. But in any case, I guess we could move on to. I wanted to ask about the LCD GX. That's a headphone that's been very well received, both in terms of it's a much lighter headphone than certainly what I was used to. And it's very comfortable, and then also it has a very agreeable, like everything about it is just, it seems to nail exactly where the price point is and everything. But I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on the LCD GX, but not as a gamer headphone?
I mean, see, whether it's a gamer headphone or an audiophile headphone, our philosophy is almost always the same. We want to create headphones that sound like a good pair of reference speakers in a well-treated room. Okay. We all, and this is not just what I'm saying now, but if you go back and look at what we were trying to do in 2011 and 12, or even before that, it's the same philosophy. So what we have done is we have 3 or 4 different ways of trying to figure out what would be the ideal response that we want to achieve. One is we made there is I don't know if you guys know Kavi Alexander. He used to work with us quite a bit. He has a couple of Grammys, and he created a reference set of recordings for us. So where it's a controlled recording with instruments that we know, placed in particular known positions, and where we could see, we were at the recordings, we knew how they sound, so we can actually test against those recordings, especially for spacing and reproduction of the tonal quality. We also put microphones inside our. We have probe microphones where we have almost all the engineers here have had measurements done near their eardrum. So we know exactly their frequency response with what they are perceiving it. Then we compare it to the frequency response of measurement heads and stuff. So our goal has, from the very beginning, has been to achieve this. I think what you're seeing with the we also think there is a small transition in how people are perceiving these things now. So GX is a very good example of even if you look at not just GX but even Mobius and LCD1, I think the frequency response is a lot more like what you perceived. Um, from a other weight perspective, GX, because of gaming, we wanted to make it light. So we thought we could sacrifice a little bit of efficiency to make it lighter. That's how we ended up with the GX.
Hmm. So correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the LCD GX is single-sided, right?
Correct. Yeah, single-sided.
And so I've always, again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I've always thought that when you lose one of the sides, there's a chance that you can lose some of the performance there as well, because you don't have as many parameters to work with. Is the way that you make up some of that ground, or how do you go about making up some of that performance ground? Is it a matter of refining the diaphragm itself, or what's the process there?
So it's a little lot more. We could talk
By all means.
for a whole show. But the GX is not our first single-sided headphone. The EL lights, the Sine, the Mobius, LCD1 are all one-sided, single-sided magnet. Even the iSigns are single-sided magnets. So this is something that we have been working on for a time. So the way we do any headphone design is, it starts with the magnetic circuit design, right? So if you look at the magnetic circuit of the LCD2, that was our first headphone that we had, or even the LCD1, the original LCD1, it's very similar, is they have a magnetic structure that's a little bit staggered. And the magnetic flux is very uniform between them. The LCDX and the LCD3 had magnets on top of each other. The EL lights were the first ones where we had one-sided magnets, and they are very, so when we use one-sided magnets, the biggest issue that we have is efficiency, right? So especially if you're going to make a consumer headphone like the Mobius, you'd want it to be as efficient as possible because you want to have a lot of battery life in these headphones. So part of this, when we in 2013 and 14, when we started thinking what do we want to do with planar drivers and stuff, one of our biggest goals was to make planar drivers lighter, more efficient, right? So that's one of the things that we did with the Fluxor magnets. So with the Fluxor magnet, we can get almost twice the magnetic flux of a N95 magnet, structured with a regular one. So if you look at the magnetic flux from LCD2, for example, with a double-sided magnetic structure, we can get almost the same flux on a single-sided ones with Fluxor.
So with the Fluxor, that's you said so it's not using N95.
It is using N95.
Oh, it is, okay.
It is using N95, but the way we make these magnets. So if you look at LCD2, the north and south are in if you cut the magnet, the bar magnet, the north will be on one side, south will be on the other side,
right?
But if you look at the Fluxor magnets, it's actually two magnets together for the same size, but the north to south, the direction of the magnetization will be diagonal, and then again another one. So the flux on the top side is twice of what we get on the bottom. And this is one thing that helps us to still get the flux that we need for efficiency.
Right.
So the DX uses the same principle.
Right.
Okay. And when we make very high-end headphones, like the very thin diaphragms, like the LCD4, right? So taking one step back, the force on the diaphragm is proportional to the flux density, the current density, and the length of the voice coil. Okay, so also what we want to do is to, when we make very thin diaphragm, we also need to move it because the metal that is available to carry current is also very small. So putting a double fluxor in LCD4, for example, helps us to make the headphones as quite a bit more efficient than making it with regular magnets.
So that's if anybody thought the LCD4 was difficult to drive, it's more efficient than it could have been.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, imagine if you use LCD2 magnets.
Yeah, if you put the LCD2 magnets, you need a bigger amplifier.
Yeah, yeah.
And there were other headphones companies that made with those kind of approaches. The problem is even the original LCD4, for example, before the 4Z came, the very first units we had 100 ohms impedance, and they were a little bit more difficult to drive than the subsequent versions.
Mhm.
Oh,
Right.
even though the impedance was higher. Oh,
Yep.
Well, the efficiency probably was also.
right. Yeah, exactly. The efficiency must have
Yeah,
changed then too.
it's you know, and many people also, when we talk to not the reviewers but the consumers, they prefer higher efficiency headphones. And we can also see it when we have a higher efficiency headphones, they sell better.
Is this so as a trend in the audiophile world, and also just I guess consumer headphone world? People are wanting to buy nicer and nicer headphones, and most of them probably don't really think about the the amps and DACs and all the rest of this stuff. Whereas us who are a little bit more strongly entrenched in the audiophile
Just a
segment,
little bit.
yeah, like for us, I think we're often thinking to ourselves, why are so many planar headphones coming out, that are sacrificing performance for the benefit of being more efficient? Because for us, we all have these amps and DACs and everything anyways. Or even also, like, I can't remember who it was who said this, maybe it was Metal actually, but
I think I definitely said that at some point. Yeah.
the idea that over 50 headphones that cost over $1,500, and in some cases there are headphones that cost like $3,500, that they're made super efficient. That idea doesn't, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance there for the entrenched audiophile like us, because it's like, if we're going to spend that much money on the headphones, it's very likely that we would also have the required source key to be able to power it if it were more power hungry. So I mean, is this just a matter of trying to broaden the reach and broaden the audience a little bit?
Correct. I mean, when you put a headphone out, you don't really know who buys them, right?
For
It's
sure.
very difficult to figure out. If we sell it directly, at least we have some idea. But we have users, for example, we have users from some researchers in near New Zealand use this for some studies and stuff, to people, audiophiles, to sound engineers, to mixing engineers, mastering engineers. A lot of different type of people use the same headphones we make. For example, the XC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even the LCD3, for example. We think of it as like a audiophile headphone, but once we saw some, the sound engineer for Lord of the Rings was using it and in his studio.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to hit a balance between all these things. Sometimes we design products that we say, okay, this is just an audiophile product. We do not really think somebody else will use it. So efficiency, we can sacrifice efficiency and put it out there. For example, LCD3,
Right.
it's not as efficient. It's still very efficient headphone, but it that's a good example where we said it's just purely going to be an audiophile headphone.
Right. Right. um Metal, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, yeah, it's a matter of, I was gonna say, it's a matter of market. Like, we don't it doesn't, yeah, like you said, it doesn't even compute in our heads. I mean, when you can get a 789 nowadays for, it's actually down to like, what is it, like 299 or something here.
Yeah.
It used to be 399, and like, it's so like that, and that'll drive LCD4 just fine. I mean, that's how I actually reviewed it. I mean, there are better amps, obviously, sound quality wise, but power wise, it's not that bad to drive. Actually, I did have one question for Shankar, because I remember that Tile, I think it was Tile, went to the Audeze booth. I don't know which can jam this was, but you guys had some like 1,000 ohm impedance prototype floating around at that time. I was
Yeah.
wondering what that was all about.
No, I mean, we had a 1200 ohms impedance
The
headphone.
1200.
1200. Jesus.
So, so many times, I would say about 20% of the products actually come to market that we make, prototypes and stuff. Many times 25%. Sometimes, at least in the initial days, we used to do a lot more try different things, because if you look at it from planar designs and designs that are, if you look at all the companies in planar headphones, they are very different designs. The head designs that we make, or designs that Hi-Fi Man makes, or even what Oppo and these guys
Mm-hmm.
make, are very different type of planar designs, right? And even if you look at Audeze headphones alone, the LCD2 uses a different magnetic structure than LCD X. Then the Mobius uses a very different structure. And in so there is a lot of areas that where we could do research and improve things. One thing that, because we make our drivers from scratch, right? We make our own thin film. We cast our own film. So the material science and all these things, we are learning new things all the time. We try to put many of these things into practice. So one of the things was to see how fine could our traces be packed in a driver, right? So in the if you look at it in if old radios and stuff, there used to be these very high impedance drivers, so that you could drive it from tubes directly.
Mm.
So the 1200 ohms impedance headphone was just a engineering prototype that we made. Sounded really good, but then
What did you use to drive it?
I think we actually found an old, I believe it's a Philips amplifier.
Oh, okay.
We got off. I'm not fully sure what it was, but it was something that we could actually drive directly.
It was like a speaker amp or something.
It was
Yeah,
speaker.
yeah.
That's what we need. We need an LCD5 with like 2,000 ohms, and it requires at least a shit LiDAR to
Yeah.
run.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is also, I think, for audiophiles, the fun is being able to make as much use of the source equipment as possible. So you realize that not only you're getting the most of the headphones, but you're getting the most out of the source gear, and you're finding the best synergies and systems and all the pairings and everything that makes sense for all the different pieces that you have. Which it makes me think that probably, as you're saying, the rest of the world doesn't have that same penchant for pairing different pieces of equipment together that we do.
You just want things to work. There are a lot of
Yeah.
categories. I think that's where 4Z and MX4 and LCDX all come in. And LCDX is really popular, from what I know, among the pro audio crowd, probably at least partially because it's so efficient. So
That was the main reason, right? In the initial days when we did the LCD3, we found out that many audio engineers would just plug it into their consoles and stuff, which did not have really good, powerful amplifier option.
yeah.
So the LCDX was specifically designed for that in the initial days. Yeah.
Right. I guess we could move on to some of the technical questions. We were talking about this at Can Jam, at the recent Can Jam, and I felt like it was probably worth getting to the bottom of again, or talking more about. But the question of where does slam come from in planar magnetic headphones, and why some seem to have it and others, more commonly even, don't. So, for example, the Hi-Fi Man and Nando, or a lot of the egg-shaped Hi-Fi Man headphones don't have the same kind of slam quality as, like a LCD4, or the LCD1 doesn't have the same kind of slam quality as maybe like an LCDX, even though, as you're saying, it has the same or similar driver there. I just want to get your comments on
So
where
the
that stuff
LCD1
comes from.
driver is very different from LCDX driver. The
Okay.
thin film is probably similar, but
That's
driver
that's the
different. So there is slam could mean a couple of different things, right? But different people think of it in a different way. But I think what it is, in our opinion, is it's the impact, physical impact that we get from a driver is what is usually referred to as slam. And if you see, it really depends upon several different things. One is the driver itself. The cone speakers, for example, can displace a lot more air than planars or even electrostats, right? So the displacement, the ability of the driver to displace, I think, matters. Then the second thing is the seal, the ear pads, how do they interact with the skin and all that stuff. We
Right.
had a customer who felt that he was not, he had a frequency response curve from us, and he felt it was very different than, you know, and so he actually came to the facility and we measured his headphone and we found out it actually had the perfect frequency response, but he was wearing glasses.
Yeah.
It was breaking the seal. And when we showed him the measurement of wearing glasses versus not wearing glasses, it's huge in the low end when you don't get a seal. But I think the more important thing that you're referring to here is the physical impact created by the displacement of air.
Yeah.
So if you, that's why I think more people, feel that when you have a cone speaker, you get that quite easily compared to other drivers like electrostatics, for example. The other thing is also it is possible when you have very low damped or underdamped systems, you could have resonances in the low frequencies that actually they make you think you have better slam, but it's not. It's the diaphragm is not very well controlled also. So there could be multiple factors for this.
Yeah, that I mean, that's one of the things that also I mean, when you hear the dynamic driver's slam quality, it also isn't as like tight and well controlled as very linear planar magnetic headphones or planar magnetic headphones that are really linear in the bass, where you can actually hear the tone more distinctly on the planar magnetic headphone, but it doesn't have as much of that sort of excursive kind of impact feeling. And so, like in my mind, that's always been the trade-off. But then occasionally, you do have. I mean, even like the HE6 has quite good slam as well. There, as Max Setting was talking about. So to me, those parameters are very interesting. But I think what you mentioned there about the pads and the seal and all that, I think that's something that I hadn't thought about. Where if the seal isn't there, you're not getting the same. The air movement isn't going to be the same, right? It could go everywhere.
Yeah, you'll see a roll off also.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely roll off in the frequency response. I mean, uh, is there any kind of design philosophy where you go, we want this one to have a lot of really good punch and slam and impact as a trade-off, or
I mean, I mean, easily, there's different philosophies for this, but that's why I think you also feel it a little bit more in LCDX than in LCD1, primarily because of the displacement.
right?
So in a single-sided driver, the farther you go from the magnets, it also becomes there's less magnetic flux available, right? It's
Right.
within a double-sided driver, it's more uniform, so you get much more
Right.
well. I think it also the flexibility of the driver diaphragm material also matters. The thinner the diaphragm, the more flexible it is, you can get away with much more excursion than very thick diaphragm.
So the thicker diaphragms are stiffer.
Thicker diaphragms will be stiffer, and
Interesting.
yeah.
Cool. Any thoughts on that stuff, Metal? I know we were talking about that again, Jeff.
Yeah, I had thought about I always forget the stiffness of the material definitely plays a major role. I mean, just subjectively speaking, the Audeze headphones with a stronger magnetic structure in them just seem to have better defined and more bass impact to them too. So I think, as you already said, Shankar, the magnetic flux definitely plays a role along with the drivers themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I
Like the
always find it.
strength. I didn't think about the field, but yeah, that makes sense with the single-sided too. That's not as uniform. Yeah. Yeah, the GX too. Like, even though I think it has probably the best frequency response, Max says the same thing than a lot of the other big LCDs. It doesn't have quite the same impact either, and that's probably at least partially because of the single-sided magnets.
Yeah, that's what I would imagine. But at the same time, I don't know if you find it like this, but I found that the GX had a much more spacious soundstage than what I was used to as well.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't think it was that different from my LCD too.
Are you
But I'll
wearing
have
it
to
right
check
now?
that again. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I can't. It's mono audio, so
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, I guess we can move on to. I wanted to get your take, Sankar, on, you know, us reviewers like to talk about detail retrieval, much to the dismay of a lot of the viewers who haven't had a chance to experience all the different things that we have.
Yeah.
In your mind, where does this quality come from that separates the the detail capability of something like an LCD4 from a LCD2 or LCD1 or LCD GX? That difference is something that we tend to key in on, but I'm just wondering what your take is on where that quality comes from.
So in frequency response, the detail or the transparency, I mean clarity, all these things are a little bit related to each other, I think. If let's us if you have a frequency response is uniform, you will hear detail in the low frequencies and high frequency and everywhere. It's not just in a particular frequency range, right? You can hear details in bass, for example. So part of this comes from how fast your diaphragm can move, how far can it accelerate from point A to point B, and this depends on the force on the diaphragm also, and the mass of the film. So if you have a very thin film like ultra thin diaphragms, you will be able to get a lot of these things without smudging the frequency. I think you'll be able to hear the details, and it'll be much more clearer for you as well. In terms of frequency response, there's also you can boost some presence in the boost some frequencies in the presence range that will appear as more detail to you, but that's it's a little bit misleading. But if you have very thin diaphragms, very pliable diaphragms that are very responsive, you can and very well controlled, you can get very good detail. So the difference between the LCDX and the LCD4 is obviously the very thin diaphragms.
Right. So it's responsiveness of the diaphragm. That's sort of what we were assuming.
Yeah, and the responsiveness, as I mentioned earlier, it depends upon three things primarily. I mean, the primary thing is the weight of the diaphragm. The heavier the diaphragm, it's harder to move it. Right. But if you look at the force acting on the diaphragm, it's a flux density, the current density that we can get through it, and also the length of the voice coil. So those are the three primary things that affect the force on the diaphragm, and which relates, mass acceleration. You get faster response from the driver.
Cool. So, I mean, we were talking in the last live stream about how, maybe if a headphone could produce up to, 40K hertz or something like that, that might be an indicator that, it might have better detail because it could move fast enough to be able to produce those frequencies. But of course, we weren't saying anything definitively, just, guessing, I guess.
So see, the thing is, it depends upon, probably many headphones can reproduce 40 kilohertz. Yeah. But what would be the amplitude that they create at 40 kilohertz, right? So if you have a drop off, and then, if you look at it, most transducers are designed to be linear, so that you don't create problems in the audible range as well.
Right. I mean, 20 to 20K is all that really matters for the experience is concerned. But thinking of maybe I was thinking maybe as much as some of the specs that you see are ridiculous, maybe there is an indicator there for something if it does show that it goes up to 40K hertz, but it probably is it's
it's called the dB points. That's the problem. Like if you're 10, 15, 20 dB down at 40K, I mean, like that's very different than being only 3 dB down versus 1K energy.
So I don't know if any headphone manufacturer actually publishes.
I know. I was gonna say that too.
Not the amplitude, no.
I have even seen 80 kilohertz in some headphones.
Yeah, but it's like 1 dB.
The question is how much is the drop off there?
Yeah.
And it's again also sometimes it's there's the same problem with efficiency measurements as well. I know I'm digressing a little bit from your question, but if you measure the efficiency of a headphone, you can measure it at different points: the ear entrance point, the ear reference point, or the drum reference point. In the beginning with LCD2s and stuff, we always published our efficiency at drum reference point. okay, because we didn't know, that was what we assumed was the right way to do it. And then in 2013 or 2012, some other headphone company came in and started publishing it at the ear reference point, which is like if you put your hand here, what would be the efficiency at place, and that they actually quoted some AES or ITU specification. So what happened was we realized not even the reviewers actually realized that there was a difference. They were assuming the efficiency of our headphones was comparable to the efficiency of this new headphone, even though these were at two different points, and that if you measure them in a rig, you will get about 3 dB difference. So then we started changing it, and now I think we publish it also. Most people now publish it at the ERP. So there are also, when you look at the specs of these headphones and stuff, a lot of details are left out that, for example, efficiency. A lot of headphones claim 96 dB efficiency or 102 dB efficiency. The question that very few people ask is, at which point is this measured? Is it measured at the drum reference point or the ear entrance point? And so that makes a significant difference. It's the same with frequency response.
Right.
Like also, how is this measured?
Actually, on that subject, that is my next question for you. It's what for you guys when you're devising target curves, what do you guys use for like when you're doing measurements? I've seen some of the measurements posted, from, I think, was it the 45 BB? Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I was just wondering, like, first, what do you guys use for like an ideal target that you're aiming for? If it's based on a certain curve or a certain type of tuning, and then also like what would you guys use ideally to publish measurements?
So in the beginning days, we used to publish frequency response from a Neumann KU100. That was the original LCD2, and the main reason we used to send those was in the initial days, in 2009-10, it was very few people who were actually providing graphs. And when we bought the KU100 from Neumann, they actually came with a graph for calibration. So we thought it would be a good idea to put a graph with our headphones also.
Right.
And then, so the way we do this is we have, like I mentioned earlier also, we have 3 or 4 different core principles that we have. One is we have our own set of reference recordings and stuff that we have created in a controlled room with controlled positioning of these musicians. And this was recorded for us by Kavi Alexander. We know how they sound, what should be the how the particular person is placed 15 degrees to the right, 4 feet from the microphone, things like that. So we have our own set of recordings. We also have our own set of speakers in a well-treated room. So this has always been our reference for what our headphones should sound like. Then in terms of measurement equipment, we have pretty wide variety of them. The primary ones that we have is, let me write it, it's the Kimar.
Right.
RA0045, I think, is a model with the
Right.
IP 60318, I think, is the number. We use the Pinna KB066. This is what we have been using for a number of years, and we are very comfortable with. This is something that we have. We also have the Grass 43AG.
Right.
Which is what Olive uses, yeah.
Yeah, no. Initially, if you look at the original papers from Harman and their 2013 paper, they used a 45CA.
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
IEC, yeah, it was 43 BB. It was an IEC. It was a low noise, big, large pinna that they used. So the Harman curves, the target curves in their 2000, papers and stuff, used a measurement rig. So the reason we know this, got the to compare against our measurements when Tile's measurements looked very different, because Tile was using a different head directed, the head from somebody else. and he was comparing it to Sean Olive's measurements, and our measurements and Tile's measurements didn't look exactly the same. So that's one of the things that prompted us to get all these different rigs. The pinna also matters quite a bit, because in the original ones, I think they used the 45CA. This is the KB066 0066 pinna. So
Right. It makes me think that may be responsible for. I don't know if you saw someone was doing some comparisons between the LCD1's frequency response from you guys did with the.
Yeah. So I think we actually spoke to him also a while ago, and I believe the big difference between our measurement rig and his measurement rig, and that's actually where this discrepancy comes from, is the pinna. He's using a newer pinna. We actually ordered it. We haven't received it yet.
Oratory is.
Yeah, oratories.
Yeah.
We ordered it because of the virus situation. I don't think we
Right.
did. But the pinna is very different, and when you measure these headphones, the pinna interaction is quite a bit different with these different headphones.
Right.
So I think where the discrepancy in that particular measurement comes from. So if you are measuring this, same headphone on different pinnas, it's going to measure. It looks slightly different.
Right. So that just explains why the accuracy for, I think, that range of like 1.5 to like 2.5 K.
Yeah, somewhere around
looks a
2K,
little different.
Yeah, and that measurement, I think it shows about a 5 dB dip or something, but when we can't hear it, also perceive it at least. So
Right.
there is definitely a small dip there. It's not something, but I don't believe it's anywhere near 5.
Yeah. I mean, also, in my mind, with the LCD1 is best used with the
Oh yeah, the Reveal plugin,
Reveal Plus.
definitely.
Yeah. So, but in any case, I did think this was kind of interesting.
Yeah, the pinna is different in his rig compared to what we use.
Right. Okay, well that explains that.
Yeah, you have to be really careful reading raw graphs. I mean, that's something that I brought up. And of course, then there's the mini DSP ears, which is just not even close to industry standard.
Hilariously, though, on the compensation, it did look similar.
Somewhat similar, yeah. If you read it as a compensated graph, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what they're trying to do. I mean, that even with the in-ear thing, I mean, there is no shaping to the inside of the ear canal for that thing, so it's behind me there. And but then what they try and do is they use a compensation there with they call it their in-ear target, which makes it seem like it would be. It makes it measure kind of normal for a lot of IEMs, but then as soon as you have one that is just a little bit non-standard, it throws it off entirely. So
I think Oratory covered that. The acoustic impedance. I mean, Shankar can probably elaborate, but yeah, there's a lot of issues with the way the ears between headphones measures them differently.
Yeah. That's the issue. Is like occasionally it looks fairly similar to something that would be taken on a more accurate, precise system, but then so you think, okay, yeah, this is pretty good, especially when using a compensation. But then there are so many headphones that you can put on it that just because of the way that the headphone is, it'll measure totally differently.
Also, the earpad seal is slightly different. Also, even all these measurement rigs, it's very hard to get a perfect seal because the surfaces are hard. They are not easy to get a perfect seal with many measurement rigs. So, I mean, Oratory's measurements are very good. He takes care. So many times what we have is we get random graphs from people and saying, hey, your measurement looks like this compared to this measurement, but we have no frame of reference. So sometimes, in the beginning of these measurement things in 2013 or 14, we even received measurements that we could not interpret at all. And when I asked the person who was measuring it, how he did it, he basically sent me a picture of a metal shelf with grills, microphone, and some phone. I still have it. It was just, and he was publishing all these graphs, and he would also put waterfall plots and stuff. And
oh my goodness!
Explain it to so it was very difficult for us to go explain some of these things because it's yes. that particular person who is measuring them probably has a lot more experience because he has measured a whole set of experience, a whole set of headphones with that. But for us, it's very hard to go from one rig to another rig and say, hey, this is,
Yeah.
But we also now have hundreds of thousands of headphone measurements in our database now.
Right.
So internal database, we have been measuring every single headphone we made since 2010. So that also gives us a reference on how, what things to look for. Even during production, we measure diaphragms when they are actually, we cast the film. We measure the film. We measure the drivers before they are put inside headphones. So
And what are you looking for with those measurements?
what is it?
What are you looking for when you're measuring just the diaphragm or just the film?
So for example, one of the things that we do is when you make very thin films like the LCD4 film, it's very hard to figure out the thickness of the film, especially when
Right.
you're casting it. One way we can do it is to figure out, we can do it from the other way, right? We can measure the resonance of the film to figure out how thick it is,
Right.
right?
That makes sense.
We do that. We also, when we put the aluminum on top, we want to make sure it's uniform. So we have a series of measurement rigs, some impedance measurement for checking the circuits when we make them. But we also, for example, it's easier for us to check the driver quality before it goes on a headphone because you don't have to put it on a rig. You can put it on an IEC buffer, put a microphone in a standard place, and have much more consistent measurements of the driver. So during manufacturing, every single driver is measured in a buffer with, and we match them. Those kind of things are done.
Right. Right. So, but then for once it's in the headphones, I mean, when you're tuning the headphone, I mean, do you kind of go for Harman? Is that kind of a goal, or as close as possible, or what's sort of the general?
So that's what I initially said. Our headphone, we have our own Audeze curve, what we call it.
Right, from what you were, yeah.
Right, but this preceded the Harman. If you look at it,
Right.
LCD2 was used in Harman's test. In 2013, they used the LCD2 as one of the headphones in their test, and it was the most
Yeah.
preferred one as well.
Yeah, I
If you
remember
look at
that.
the graphs, they don't publish the full detail, but if you look at the graphs, the LCD2 graph is very distinct, and it was the most preferred headphone. Our philosophy has been, again, from the beginning, it has been the same. We want our headphones to sound like a
Yeah.
well-treated, good speakers in a well-treated room. So
Yeah.
that's basically what we go for. And it again, these things change depending upon the type of driver and stuff like that also.
I remember like back in maybe 2010 ish. There was planar headphones was kind of just getting into the limelight with the LCD2 and I think the HE500 and HE6 from Hi-Fi Man, and there was always this debate as to which was better, and I think everybody who people always said, if you want your bass to sound really really good, you got to go with the LCD2. And was that something that, I mean, you guys wanted from the very beginning to have really really good bass response?
Yes, yeah, we always wanted good bass
Still,
response.
yeah,
That's still in every headphone we try to achieve that. I think in the beginning days, Head5 was a lot more different.
yeah,
I actually still speak to some of those people on Head5. They are no longer on Head5, but they still, we speak to them occasionally. We also had, all these controversies and stuff are not.
yeah,
We used to have a lot more. There used to be a lot more people who were very opinionated in those, and I believe there was even a Head5 administrator at that point who didn't really like the LCD2. But when I met him at one can jam, we started talking and we explained what our philosophy was, and things became much better after that. But in the I think the initial LCD2s that we made were slightly darker than what we made after 2011 and 12.
Right, right.
That
Because I
was
did notice there was it changed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we started out, our diaphragms were made for us outside Odyssey. Somebody made the film, somebody etched it,
Right.
all those things. In 2013, we started bringing some of those things internally, and by 2016, everything was completely moved in-house for diaphragm making.
Right. Right.
So there were significant changes, and again, it's with almost any manufacturing. It's not just with Odyssey, but what happens is sometimes your supplier changes. Sometimes we have EPA regulations. We can't make this material anymore, right? There's a lot of things that happen that, if you look at it, LCD2 is a 10-year-old headphone.
Yeah.
So if you take a car, you would see obvious improvements in it, changes in it. Those kind of things have happened in LCD2, and in the both me, Alex, and even Drag, all of us came from we came from different backgrounds and software background and things like that. So in the initial days, even now, when we make a headphone, if we can make an improvement for a customer where they are paying us money, we think we should deliver them the best possible headphone that we can make them, right? So many times things have become a lot more stable now, but in the beginning days we would run production changes quite often, but we don't make that many changes unless there is significant production issues or something now. And also we have learned quite a bit in making headphones over the 10 years, so things are much more smoother making a headphone nowadays than compared to what we were trying to do in 2011 and 12.
Right. I just always remember that for me, I mean, back then it definitely. I bought one of the old like 2010 2011 LCD2s, and I definitely remember, like, I compared it to the some of the other headphones later on, and it definitely had way more of a bass presence to it. So it's not just that it was really good at detail in the bass, but it had a lot more bass energy. It was a bit warmer, tilted at the time. So it's
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember like looking at the KU100. I assume you guys are still using almost the same Neumann, maybe even the same unit
It's the
from
same.
10 years ago. It is, yeah. So like, if you look at some of the older LC2 measurements, you see that they have a flat bass and then they roll off slightly, but then they also just go straight. And on the newer ones, even I mean, the KU100 is not a measurement system really. It's more like a QC jig for you guys, I guess. But you can see that there's a little tip up at 10K, that there's a little bump there, and that didn't used to be there from some of the older graphs I've seen posted.
No, those are so some of those things are mostly related to the ear pads. Some ear pad construction.
Oh, you've changed the pad. Yeah, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
so many of those things are related to ear pads and stuff, not really the driver. The driver remains, so it's harder to change these things in the base of these drivers compared to high
Oh,
frequency.
okay.
Some of those things are ear pads or the seal, and how much clamping force, those kind of things.
right. I guess brings me to my last question before we get into some Q&A, unless Metal has some other questions for you. I wanted to get your take on, I mean, I asked you this as well at CanJam, but I wanted to get your take on where the high end of this kind of stuff is going to go in the future. Is it going to be more pushing the boundaries on for planar magnetic headphone technology? Is it going to be more pushing the boundaries on detail and frequency response and all of the sonic characteristics, or is it going to be taking what's already there and just refining it and making it lighter and more comfortable, or maybe introducing again maybe closebacks or wireless, or which it seems like it could go in either direction, maybe both. I don't know if that's a false equivalence or
No,
false disjunction, but
yeah, I think there will be a lot of different things that come up. So one of the things that I think definitely will happen is the high-end headphone industry, because at least we have to make them aesthetically more pleasing. So
interesting.
that trend is, I think it's coming up. Lighter, definitely, and efficiency. The efficiency, lightness is always a factor that we have to balance out. And also, I think there will be lot of improvements in material science. So we will be able to do things that smaller, lighter headphones and things like that because of improvements in material. So that is one, in if you look at it in a pure audiophile product, there is a lot of things that we are still doing in material science development, creating new materials that will have impact. It'll also have impact in other areas, I think, not just planar. So that's one thing. So second thing, I think also in the Bluetooth and so as these headphones become more efficient, we can afford to make Bluetooth and wireless headphones that are very efficient, that compete with battery life of a cone speaker, right? So for example, the LCD1 closedback Felix model, we get 60 hours of battery easily. I've also seen some new headphones that get almost 100 hours of easily. And this seems to be actually in non-audiophile circles in gaming and stuff. This seems to be actually a fairly important thing. People want battery life. They don't want to charge it often because it's one another product that they have.
Yeah.
So that's something that we see. We also see in terms of non-headphone things, a lot of custom HRTFs and stuff like that coming up. The new PlayStation, they announced that you'll be able to have custom HRTFs in PlayStation 5. So the 3D audio immersion, you will be able to get probably custom HRTFs uploaded to the PS5. The initial version, I think, will have 3 or 4 different versions that you can pick and choose. But eventually they will allow you to create your own custom HRTFs and upload them. So I think there's a lot of different things that are very interesting that's happening in this area.
Right. This is not just a matter of taking some LCD4s and putting them on famous athletes and getting photo shoots with.
So that I mean, it's that helps, right?
Yeah.
The picture, the video of Elon Musk wearing the LCD.
Yes.
That was great.
I all of a sudden on one day in 5 o'clock in the morning, our Twitter feed just started blowing up. We were like, what is going on? And then I initially thought somebody actually had photoshopped the picture because it didn't real in the beginning. So then we realized, I mean, those things have significant impact beyond. We have a lot of people who use our headphones, and we don't know how, many times we don't know how they got these headphones. Sometimes they get it directly. But we have a lot of musicians using our headphones, and it's always interesting to get their perspective. For example, in one review, somebody had said that the particular LCD1 headphone, they were trying to get the tone of, something did not sound correct compared to the thing. And then that particular day, we had the mastering engineer for that who mastered that song at Audeze. It was very interesting to get his take, So it's always interesting to see. But I mean, all these things get us good publicity. So
yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, that pretty much does it for my list of questions. Before turning it over to some questions from the chat, I'll ask Metal. Do you have anything you want to talk about with Sankar?
No, I just want to see what comes next. Because new Audeze headphones are always good. Well, you guys are more of, I mean, I think this is accurate, but you guys are more of like an R&D company because you're always developing new stuff. But audio is just kind of like the result of it. I remember you said in some interviews that you looked at thin films, but like the application could be anything. And I guess you ended up with headphones on that, right?
I mean, we are an audio company. But
yeah, no, definitely.
Definitely an audio company. But we have very diverse people with very diverse experiences at Audeze. We have people who have developed materials for space applications, right? And people, Pete, who worked with, helped us start Audeze, works with satellites and solar sails and stuff like that.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we have Drag, who has had 40 years of experience with planar drivers. We have Karthik, who does machine learning. He teaches machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So we are, experience at people at Audeze is very diverse, and a little bit of these things come into Audeze. So that I think that's also our strength. So we want to keep it to where we are very creative. We create these new different types of headphones. Like for example, when I met Axel Grell from Sennheiser, he previously from Sennheiser, he said the Mobius was the one that was most surprising for him from coming out from Audeze, right? So I think that our strength lies in creating new things that are a little bit ahead of the market. So now I see a lot of other companies trying to create a Mobius-like headphone, right? So I think, but we are at least 18 months ahead of them. So that's, I think, part of our strength, and that's where we want to focus on going in future as well.
Yeah, us reviewers love the whole innovation aspect because there's a lot of brands that are just sticking to their guns and they're not really doing something that's really trying to push things in a new direction. So it's very interesting to follow all of this. So that's one reason why I like Audeze, because you guys are always trying something new. So, but anyway, that's not really much of a question, but
It's
That
interesting
counts.
times.
it's a good observation. Yes.
Did you were showing us some I guess I don't even know if they're prototypes or just wacky headphone designs. Did you want to show this on the stream? Or?
Sure, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so part of it is because at Audeze we try to see what is out there, right? So sometimes we get all these Kickstarter headphones. Sometimes they actually deliver on Kickstarter, right? So once in a while we actually get headphones delivered. But the one fun headphone I showed you, I think I showed it to you at Can Jam, was a human.
Oh, yes.
That kind of hugged your ear. That was interesting. We got those. There was also this headphone from I think Yamaha made the drivers for it. I'm not fully sure who. This is, I think, a planar driver. It was a Bluetooth headphone. Had a very wacky. So it actually came with two different types of ear cups. One was this. One was just a frame. So it was completely open. And so we have a very good collection of headphones. If you guys ever want to come here and measure and review them,
Yeah.
experience.
I'd be curious about that original LCD one, like the
Do you
very
have that
old.
floating around? Yeah, that would be
I
fun
don't
to
know if
see.
we have the original LCD one. We have somewhere. I don't
Or
have.
LCD. I don't know. Yeah. It's,
So this is a early prototype of EL8.
Yeah.
You can see it actually had a very different type of carbon fiber headband. Was designed, 3D printed. So it's a lot of wacky headphones. And this was the original design of the Sign open back.
right.
This was before we changed the grill. I mean, yeah, quite a bit of things floating around here.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I guess with that we could probably turn it to the questions from the chat. Metal, if you can.
Yeah, I know somebody. I was looking at it.
I did already have one as well. There was a question from Chris. He was wondering which speakers you guys use for your reference
that's
monitors.
what I was going to ask too.
We actually have our own speakers built with planar drivers.
Oh, really?
Can Jam 2011, I believe.
Crazy.
Yeah, we built it. It's a 7 foot high. I think I'll send some pictures later on.
Cool.
7 feet tall. It's a line array.
Cool.
Oh, here's one that I've been wondering forever. What does LCD stand for?
That was one of those names we didn't have anything. I think we had too many beers before I did. Yeah. So many of our other names after LCDs have some relation to science fiction, for example.
Right.
But before LCD was, just too many beers. That's all.
Liquid crystal display.
Yeah.
Emphasis on the liquid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. We always wanted to have, another model of LCD called LSD, mind-altering headphones. But, we thought we already have enough problems with custom stuff. We don't want to have. What do you have? One box LSD. So we dropped that name.
That's awesome.
But there is, the Deckard is from Blade Runner. Odyssey itself is from 2001.
I thought Deckard was going to be from Diablo.
No, Deckard, no, Deckard is from Blade Runner.
Okay.
Then Mobius obviously is from Escher paintings of Mobius, where everything inside is outside, right? So when we
Right.
had the tracking, we were trying to take the audio from inside your head to outside. Without, that was the reasoning behind Mobius. And Cypher was also something similar. Cypher was our lightning cable, but also it's a name of the character in Matrix,
Right.
who kind of goes back. So we thought it was it was an inside joke in the beginning, where because we were working with iPhones and stuff, and we were, it was an inside joke that we are basically taking this high-end audiophile product and going,
Wasn't he the bad guy in the Matrix?
it was a guy who actually goes back into the Matrix.
Yeah.
He says, I know the stake is not real, but it feels real. So
Right.
that was the idea behind the Cypher cable.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Audiophile equipment, but it's a little bit of a sellout.
Sheldon's asking, what's your personal setup for DAC and amp and headphones? Like, what would be your go-to? Like, if you're to use like your high-end setup, what would it be?
We have several different units here, but we have always used from the beginning. We have always used a Audio W. It's a W8SE. I think
Okay.
it's the one with the 2 units.
Yep.
We also use Card, Hugo, and Dave.
Right. The good stuff.
So, but the part is, because we make headphones and we go to a lot of trade shows, there is a lot of amplifier manufacturers. They use our headphones, or we use their amplifiers. So a lot of at any point we have a lot of units floating around our facility. So for trade shows, we try to use a different one every time.
Right. And you would use that with like an LCD4 or something.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the latest one I think we have in the office that gets used quite a bit is the Nagra.
Oh, you guys have the Nagra.
Oh, Flux just, oh my God, he went crazy over
Yeah.
that thing at the show. I know. He really loves it.
Yeah. Did you guys have that at the booth at the show?
I think we had it at
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's where he tried it.
Yeah, because I remember
That's
he was telling me
crazy.
about the hearing the Sesvara on it. I was thinking that was at the Odyssey booth, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was at the Odyssey booth.
But he
yeah.
brought his own Sesvara, so
Yeah, he just walked around with the Sesvara at the show. That's how you
just
know.
casually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things are very interesting also. So when I actually met the CEO of Nagra, he showed me the unit that they sent to Moon.
Mm.
They actually had a tape recorder, like small one, that they sent to Moon for the Apollo missions. So they actually had a unit from there also.
Someone was telling me that those were the ones that were used in like the Watergate tapping and like all kinds
They
of.
also use it.
Oh, no way.
Correct. Yeah, they used to make a lot of these things for spy agencies.
Yeah. Someone had a good question here, but I'm going to modify a little bit. What were your favorite headphones to develop? Like, what was not to listen to necessarily, but like the favorite project?
I mean, it's a whole team here that develops it. We have had a lot of fun developing. Almost every headphone that we have had, the new one that always becomes the favorite, right? Because it's something new we are trying. Mobius actually was one of the most fun we have had creating a headphone, because of the amount of very different things that we could actually bring together. And in the initial days, we even had doubts whether we could pull it off with all these different things, right?
Yeah.
Again, you have, a headphone takes about 18 months to develop, 12 to 18 months, right? Something like a Mobius. That would be the quick turnaround. So we released Mobius in 2018, but we started development of it in 2017. So we have to think back to 2017 when we were trying to put all these things together and we wanted to pull it off. It was, there were also other things that we wanted to put in that we had to remove from the final headphone. But it was very, very interesting project. We are working on a couple of new things that are super interesting. One of them is actually for the medical application. It has some medical applications for it. That is really, really very interesting for me personally. There is always some new things that we are working on that, it's the same thing. Even when we did the EL8, it was very interesting working with Design Works and to completely design a headphone from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of our headphones is there.
Was there ever one project where you were just like, oh, this is so frustrating to work on, or I
Yeah,
can't believe as
it
well?
is. So there's a lot of ones. For example, the original signs were very difficult to
Sorry,
create.
the eye signs?
I
The
sign, yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
sent it in 20. So the difference between what we designed initially from industrial design to what it ended up was like drastically different.
Mm.
The original, I think there is some video from Head5 when Tile actually shot it. The original license designs were actually like a, almost like a true, like what you see with the true wireless headsets. They actually were kind of rectangular, and they would come out like the Bluetooth
Oh.
headset, Motorola and stuff. And the drivers was actually rectangular. Then we went with we couldn't get the frequency response even remotely good, so we changed it, and then we ended up with this new design. But it actually, the original design from Design Works actually had a leather cover on it for the eye signs. So we worked with a company in Turkey that used to make really nice leather, perforated leather and stuff, but we could not make production units or even close to making good looking units, because when the leather becomes very small, it becomes very stiff. They have to
Yes.
laminate it to get the things to be not peel off. So it took us almost 6 months or something just trying different materials, and then we went with the Star Wars kind of design on it.
Star Wars design. That's great.
Yeah.
TIE fighter design.
I think we
Yeah.
missed this one during the stream. Usually I start with this question with Shankar. At least I did when I did my live stream. Someone says, "How does Audeze get started? Who started the company?" And it'd be cool to have that information on your website.
It actually is, I know,
That's what I thought. I didn't.
it's there on the website, and I think their website, when we moved to Shopify, it changed something.
No.
I mean, we'll post it again. That's no big problem in it. It's. I think. I think that story is there all the time on Headfi and stuff. But I will tell you something else that's a little bit more. The first time we actually made the planar headphone with the LCD ones, me and Alex went to like a headphone show in LA. This was before we went to CanJam, and we were so shy we didn't talk to anybody. We actually came back because and then we posted online about this headphone, and there was a guy called Kabir Nawaz from the UK who contacted us, and he was on Headfi, and he had created the original thread. He randomly found us by googling it, and then he contacted us, and he said, you should come to CanJam and show your headphone. And that is how we actually said, okay, let's go back again and try to show this. And in between those, I actually took a planar driver, went to AES, and I showed it to, at that time, the person in charge at Ultrasound. They had a huge booth at AES, and our initial idea was, time we were still trying to figure out, should we make the headphone or should we just make the driver and people. So we showed it to Ultrasound and see if they would be interested in making a headphone, and they were not interested. So we came back, but then Kabir contacted us, and we went back to CanJam. This was 09, and we didn't even have power supply. We just went there, and John Pertel and Jude were. We said, can we get a table? And they said it's $500 for a table. So we said, it's still we don't even know whether we are going to start a company. It's still a hobby. And then said, okay, I'll give you half a table. So that's what we took. We took half a table, but we went there and realized we don't even have trip. We just went there with our headphones and a small amplifier. Then our Phil Tendler, he was making cables at that time. He was the other half of the table we had shared. He gave us his power supply and stuff, and these were massive power conditioners. And then Ray Samwells from Ray Samwells Audio came by and said, "Why are you guys using this shitty amplifier?" Yanked the amplifier from me and gave me one of his. And then
These were cutthroat.
yeah. But then the response was massive. Sachu, Kabir, a lot of these guys actually encouraged us to actually do this, and that's when we started getting a little bit more confident we can actually put the headphones on our own. And then at the same time, Jerry Harvey was he had it's the same place when he first showed his JH Audio INEOS. So we started getting a little bit of connections and trying to, and Alex Cavalli was there, and also another amplifier manufacturer was there. I mean, in those initial days of Head5, there used to be a lot more amplifier manufacturers than headphone manufacturers. You will find Audeze, Hi-Fi-Man, Sennheiser, Bayer Dynamic, but not as many as we do now. But there were a lot more amplifier manufacturers who were very active. Ray Samwells, Cavalli, they used to also come to these trade shows. And it was very different experience in those days. I'm not saying it was better or anything. It was just things have changed and evolved. And that's how we, the initial days of Head5. Then I think we went to Chicago and Jam where we showed. And Jude still tells me when he saw the LCD1, he didn't think we would make a good headphone at all. It was only when he saw the LCD2 that he actually got a little bit more confident. That's why he was very skeptical. That's why he said, "Okay, half a table for $250."
Wow. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've never heard this story either, so that's great.
Someone was asking. I mean, everybody seems to be asking when are we going to get an LCD closed flagship? I think we've asked that already.
Yeah, I mean, this year, we are planning for quite a bit of headphones. I'm not sure when we will release them because of the virus situation.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a very busy summer for this year. So.
Yeah. We'll leave that one there. Yeah. Someone asks. Actually, I mean, there's been a couple questions about using, why did you guys want to go with planar magnetic technology over anything else? But I'd want to extend that question to: do you see anything now that's come out, whether it's an electrostatic or the head audio headphone with the AMT driver, or is there anything that gets you guys excited?
Or the ribbon driver too.
Or the
RAL interesting as well.
Yeah, all that stuff.
So part of it was also because of the people involved, right? For example, Drag, who has been with us from the start. Audeze, he has been in planar drivers and stuff for a long time. And I believe that one of the people that Drag mentored is the founder of RAL.
Interesting.
So there is, the design, even though it looks from outside, these companies are all very different. We interact with other companies quite a bit.
Right.
I mean, all these headphone approaches are very interesting, right? There are two things that come into the factor. When we obviously have to sell headphones as a business and make money. So there are always things like, is this something that we can differentiate it enough that we can actually make a difference, right? Is this something that we bring new to the table that will have some impact on the market? So part of the reason we have obviously people with experience with code speaker design to other things, but we have so far stuck to planars because we think we have a lot more experience and things that we can bring to the market. We will definitely work with other type of drivers and stuff if we think we can make a significant improvement in it. The electrostatic headphones, there is some improvements in it, but we haven't seen any drastic uh, changes in it so far. That at least we, from an out, um, so things. So that's something that's interesting. The AMT driver is also very interesting. But again, of our biggest problem is this will all these things are also very heavy.
Mm-hmm.
With the um, in the play, we are trying to see, can we make, if there is something that we could do to make them lighter or something that becomes a little bit more interesting for us
Mm-hmm.
as a company.
Especially with the trends and directions of where the high end stuff is going with planars, you know, if that becomes easier to make lighter and more efficient and more accessible, why
And also, yeah, and also the automation and other things, right?
yeah,
For
of course,
example, with the Mobius, we had to make hundreds of thousands of drivers for Mobius.
right,
So this is not something that we could scale like what we were doing in the initial days of LCD headphones. So
right,
what we now have is a very automated way of manufacturing. So we figured out a lot of things that helps us to scale up Mobius, right?
mm-hmm.
Because the Mobius drivers are also in the HyperX Orbit headphones now, and the quantities are very high compared to anything that we have done in the past. So we had to figure out how do we make these things. So right now for us, a Mobius driver takes about from the diaphragm film to the finished diaphragm alone is about 18 seconds.
Wow,
So, but that required a significant amount of effort last year, or
right,
yeah, 2018, for us to put these things in place. That allows us to, and also consistency, right? So when you're
yeah,
making hundreds of thousands of these drivers, we have to figure out a way to make them more consistent.
mm-hmm.
So,
I still need to review that headphone at some point. I don't think I've ever even actually heard it. So
Yeah, Mobius is like the
at
most.
some point, yeah,
I agree. I agree with Jude on that one. I think he also said it's like the most surprising thing that
yeah.
he saw come out of Audeze. So I was like, wait a minute, gaming? No, there's no way. And then I was like, this is quite a great frequency response. That's amazing.
But it makes a lot of sense because a lot of us kind of came from that world, right? There was the crossover of, well, we have headphones on our heads, the whole time, and we would just want it to be better, and then that eventually leads down you know the rabbit hole or garden path towards LCD2 headphones and
Yeah, it
or
has to
whatever
be
else, right?
the idea that it has to be some kind of exotic thing that's so different than what we had. But yet
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
like essentially it's
Yeah,
not. It's a lot more than just a gaming headset. But
yeah,
it is,
it was
for
pretty surprising.
so we were going to publish an interview with sound engineer, I think probably in a week or two on our website. But yeah, yes, Mobius is a gaming headphone, but the way it gets used is very different. Also,
mm-hmm.
we have people just using it with Apple TV. I never thought people would use it with Apple TV when we were designing.
Oh,
So
really?
they're just
Wow.
using it, and they're like, how do we connect two um, Mobius units to the same laptop? So you can actually use multi-device option in Mac to connect it. It's very interesting how people use it. But we also know that a lot of um, mixing engineers and people with 5.1 requirements use Mobius. We have at least one studio here in LA where they use 42 seats of Mobius units just to QC movies going into Netflix, right? And then we have this his mastering engineer who or sound designer who did Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies. He is like, I'm in quarantine. I can't do anything else. I can't even go to my studio. I'm
Right.
just doing things on Mobius. But what is interesting is we have a set of customers, especially in the pro audio world, who use Mobius not just for music but also for gaming. So the sound designer who worked on Hobbit, Tintin, he also works on games all the time.
Mm.
So it was very interesting to get his perspective on how is he doing this for music? How is he doing it for movies? How is he doing it for gaming, right? And one of our favorite customers for Mobius is Tyler Bates. He was one of our first customers who actually tested Mobius even before it was released. Tyler Bates is the composer for Guardians of the Galaxy, the
Mm.
John Wick movie and stuff. But he's also in Marilyn Manson, right?
Oh, Okay.
Yeah, so it's one person, but he also composes music for games. Gods of War, right? So the musicians and sound engineers, um, they seem to be many of them at least we work with are flexible, and they all use Mobius quite a bit. We have a fair set, that's one of the reasons we actually released the ACO drivers for Mobius. So when you have to use Mobius with Pro Tools or
Right.
professional equipment, you need low latency, right? So we actually released ACO drivers, and we were surprised. You know, the number of downloads of our ACO driver is quite significant.
And this, I mean, I imagine, as you were saying before, you don't always think of, when you're designing something, you can't anticipate the reach that it's going to have for the various audiences that are going to end up. There are the various different types of people who are going to end up using it, or what it's going to be most popular for. But then after the fact, when you see this stuff now, you see all the different applications of Mobius. I imagine it gives you a whole bunch of new ideas for what else.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, right? With Mobius, if you see, we can also see other companies developing Mobius like headphones now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And some of them in the market, some of them actually, one of them got released and then pulled out of the market. So it's also very interesting to see how things will pan out in this area. I mean, gaming itself is very interesting also for as a market,
Yeah.
and also a lot of innovation going on there. Yesterday, Mark Rain, one of our users, had tweeted about. He actually was one of the first Mobius users as well, and he also has LCD headphones, but he's also one of the co-founders of Epic. So they had tweeted about the live concert inside Fortnite and 11.2 million concurrent users for it. This was day before yesterday. They are going to have one more today and tomorrow, I think.
Crazy.
So it's, I mean, you just imagine the numbers, like 11.2 million concurrent users listening to a concert inside Fortnite. So it's very interesting times, it's,
Yeah.
I think we tweeted also, it's the beginning, feels like the beginning of the meta.
Yeah. Anyways, we've been going for over an hour and a half. We should probably cut it there, unless Metal, do you have any other questions you wanted to ask from the chat, or?
Yeah, this is a quick question that I've been
Yeah.
wondering too. Just that, is the HyperX Orbit the same thing as the Mobius? Just doesn't have wireless? Is that what it was?
Yes, it's similar. The tuning and everything is the same. It's
Okay.
not different. We had to make some changes to the electronics and stuff, but it is based on the Mobius. Yes.
Okay.
Cool. I had no idea that was.
Yeah, because there have
was
been a
even-
bunch of sales going on, and people were actually asking me or showing them on Reddit, and I was like, I'm not sure if it's really the same, but I guess it is.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Someone keeps asking, can you restart selling the EL8s?
A lot of people want the EL8s to come back, and I've seen them a lot.
I know. It's always like the headphones that you discontinue that become popular quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they are actually available. It's not the case. But if you look at it, the Mobius is, I mean, it's a closedback wireless headphone and all that stuff, but the form factor of the drivers for Real Light and Mobius are not very different.
Right. That makes sense.
And the LCD one obviously is similar to Mobius in terms of also magnetic structure, driver design.
Right. I guess, yeah. Any final thoughts from either of you guys?
Oh, I didn't realize it was 1 hour 40 minutes, but I hope it was not very boring. We went into a lot of small details, and
Yeah.
I wonder how many people actually, will find these things very interesting. It's
Well, we certainly do. So.
I think a lot of people actually who tune into these, I mean, it seems like audio science is definitely a big topic, so we ask all kinds of people about that. So it's great to get your take on it, as usual.
Yeah, but definitely without trade shows and stuff, I think these things will become more important in future as well.
Yeah, true.
For sure. Anyways, thank you both for coming on. Thanks to everybody who joined us and tuned in. Like with all the rest of these, we'll be throwing this up online as a podcast as well. So if anybody wants to listen to this on the go, even though nobody's going anywhere these days, we'll make sure that's available as well. But yeah, for us, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and thanks to Metal and thanks to Sankar.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.